Then you click start, and now you get the extra juice.
No! Oh my God! Stop! No! I didn't want you to actually do it.
That's how you do the VANOVER.
How's that? What do you think?
Yeah.
I look way taller than you.
I mean, I'm also kind of slunched over. Maybe if I like.
It's because I'm close to the camera. Maybe I am taller than you. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'm taller than you.
You are now, but you look way shorter. There we go. Here we go. We'll do it like this. All right. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and I'm here at Quad Camp in Houston with Alex Vanover. Captain Vanover is your pilot name. And I'm here with you because we've been thinking a lot about 4S and 6S lately in the community. Mm-hmm. And you did something really interesting recently. You raced at the Open Grove. Was that the first race in the 2018 season?
That was not the first race in the 2018 season. That was the first, I think one of the first big races where 6S was allowed.
Right, okay, so, yeah. And you made the interesting choice to race 4S against a lot of other top racers who were racing 6S. And I wanted to get the perspective of the guy who bucked the trend about why you did that. So, why did you race 4S and not 6S?
Well, for me, I'm a setup guy, so I'm really comfortable with my current 4S setups. So for me, it's a consistency thing. You know, 6S really only became popular recently. I know there's only one or two really good motors out there right now for 6S. They're really hard to get, number one. And so for me, it was really hard to get my hands on multiple sets of those, because for me, I want to fly multiple setups of a quad if I'm going to spend a lot of time flying something. So for me, I wasn't quite ready to change over, especially with like 2 weeks till a big race, but I could get these motors. And also, I like pushing the technology, which I push the technology, as we'll talk about that. I push the technology as far as it'll go. And for me, again, it really comes down to it's something I'm comfortable with. And so like I know how my 4S quad flies. I thought it would be the fastest. We'll talk about that. And that's why I chose it. But also, I'm not one to get on hype trains very often.
Right.
So
you're not willing to switch. You're suspected 6S is a hype train. And you wanted to really test 4S and find out what the limits of 4S were. What are the limits of 4S that people are trying to, what's the problem that people are trying to, for those who are maybe less familiar with racing?
So for a racing standpoint, from a freestyle standpoint, because I fly both, in freestyle you don't get two things. You don't really worry about flight times, and you don't worry about battery sag. So the argument for going to 6S or a higher voltage is you can drop the KV of the motors, get the same power, and get less sag, right?
Right.
And we'll talk about that. As far as the downsides to 4S, you get some voltage sag. I mean, especially with a powerful motor, you hit full throttle, I mean, you're going to drop your battery voltage down to like 13, 14 volts mid-flight.
We see that in the DVRs of pilots.
And we definitely see that.
They start at 16.8, they hit the throttle, and immediately they're at
13, 14
volts.
So that's the one thing. And the second thing is these batteries just don't fly as long.
The 4-cell batteries.
In theory, they don't fly as long compared to a normal sag. I think those are kind of the arguments against 4S. The sag one is definitely a true factor. I will agree with that. I'm not quite sure, though, about the flight time.
And the reason you're concerned about flight time is especially for the qualifiers. It's most laps in 2 minutes.
Yes.
And so you must be able to fly for 2 minutes.
Yes.
And that's where you say freestyle pilots don't care. I mean, freestyle pilots are going, hey, we care about flight time, but you must make it 2 minutes and maybe a little longer, or you don't qualify well.
You need, the rule of thumb that I think I'm saying now after races is you need a quad that can fly 2.5 minutes.
And 2.5 minutes all out.
And I say all out. You need 2 minutes all out, and then usually that last 30 seconds is like finishing your lap.
Right.
So which in qualifying, where it's most laps in 2 minutes, it's really more important just to finish that last lap.
Oh, I see. So you can limp that last lap in.
Right, but you still you get into as a racer, when you do 4 laps, let's say you're trying to shoot for 5 laps, once you do 4 laps, even though you're trying to just finish that lap, I mean, you're still flying at a good pace. You don't want to fall out of the air. So really 2.5 minutes, you should plan on being all out, and that way you save yourself like a reserve tank, essentially.
So we've heard a lot of the arguments, and we'll hear a lot of the arguments about why 6S is better. One of the things people said when I did the video with Evan was that the batteries Evan is flying, the 1250 milliamp hour 6Ss he's flying, are actually more watt hours than the 1550 4Ss that most people are flying, and that the equivalent 4S to his 6Ss is actually like a 1900, which I think is really interesting because that is exactly what you flew in this race. You flew 1900 4-cells. Let's not talk about what else you did just yet. What was your experience of flying the 1900s in the race?
So 1900s, first off, my 1900s, full disclosure, are true 1850 packs. You are easily rated to charge them to about 4.25 volts, which I think get about 1900 milliamps. So let's forget the overcharging and say you go
so
to
the milliamp
4.25.
hour, the watt hours depends on the voltage. The more volts you put in, you can
Yes.
get more watt hours out of a pack by
Exactly.
overcharging it, which racers commonly do.
Right, on all sides. We'll talk about that. As far as my setup though, I ran a 1900.
Yeah.
At this Open Grove race against people on 6S, I quickly found out after, I think not my first pack out there on the track, I was on I got in the rhythm of the pace, and I quickly realized that this was going to start to be a problem. And I noticed that because I'm getting into my 4th and 5th laps, and I'm watching my voltage sag like crazy, number one, and number two, I'm limping these last laps. And this is before overcharging or anything like that.
Right.
But I quickly realized that was starting to become a problem.
So you were not able to keep up with this, and the 6S racers were finishing their laps.
They were, however, they were overcharging their batteries too, and we'll talk about how the overcharging thing.
You were, to be fair, you were also overcharging were you overcharging your 1900 at the beginning?
I was not, the very first 2 times I went out there, I wasn't overcharging my 1900.
Yeah.
I also wasn't quite yet flying at some of the paces the other guys were. I was flying a very, like a 2-minute flat 4-lap pace, which meant I was just crossing the finish line at the timer, essentially. So I didn't really have to do that 5th lap. So I started to overcharge. A lot of these guys I know were overcharging kind of from the beginning because they knew how fast they could fly.
So you feel like they still had a little bit of a watt hour advantage?
Yeah, I think they may have had just a little bit of an advantage.
So then you started overcharging to try and
Yes.
some people have heard the story. It has to be acknowledged. You were overcharging a little bit. It's common for racers to overcharge like 4.25, maybe even 4.35. And you may have heard that, probably know that high volt batteries are rated to go to 4.35 volts per cell. Most lipos will do 4.35 without exploding. They'll just have reduced cycle life.
Yep.
We're not advocating that.
Don't overcharge.
Don't overcharge. It's not safe. If you burn your house down, it's not our fault. But it is true that most lipos and racers often do that, even though they probably shouldn't.
You really shouldn't. I think there should be, and we'll talk about why.
We can talk about that. I mean, should racers be allowed to overcharge? Separate from the question of 6S, 4S.
I think it's a yes and no. I think we need to look at the battery manufacturers, and we need to ask the manufacturers what truly how safely can you do this? Like, what's a voltage where you can draw a line that it's going to work every time? I have not overcharged batteries much, believe it or not, in my time. This is only recently where I've tried this, and it hasn't worked out well for me. I think that there should be a 4.25 or 4.30 limit. In Korea, for example, when you would get out, and it's not a hard limit to enforce, you don't have people watching over your backs when you're charging. You just get out to the flight line, and you have an official there, and they just check your battery right there before you take it. It's not a hard, and there's good reasons why we're about to talk about why you should not overcharge.
Overcharging overcharging increases the risks of a fire.
It greatly increases the risks.
And you experienced a fire, didn't you?
Yeah. So,
you did.
Long story short, I agree with that.
You were overcharging the batteries to an unsafe level, a ridiculously unsafe level. To be fair. I'm not trying to beat you up, but
4.75 a cell.
You have to go in. You have to go to battery type. You don't want it on LiPo. You want to HV this thing. You click start, and once that battery hits 4.4 cell, you take it the next step. And I'm going to show you the Vanover special today. Then you click start, and now you get the extra juice.
No! Oh my God!
Stop!
No! I didn't want you to actually do it.
That's how you do the Vanover special. Send it!
And then,
which is like what? Isn't that almost like a 5S at that point?
I don't even. And the problem with doing what you're doing is that if you don't it doesn't. You've taken the brakes off the charger, and it's like, fine, I'm just charging this battery, and you actually got distracted and didn't monitor it.
Yep.
And then a fire happened.
Yeah, and by fire, I'm not talking about like a little candle. I was sitting next to the battery was sitting about where his arm is right here.
Okay.
And when that thing erupted, and I had just taken my goggles off, that was like. The way I describe it is like, imagine Mount St. Helens is a volcano. Like, this was like Yellowstone erupting. Like, this was a big fire.
Jet of flame.
This was a jet flame that shot all the way to the ceiling. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. I've only ever seen a few LiPo fires, and I've never seen one of this scale. It happened.
So you feel bad about that. Well, I'm not trying to beat you up,
of
but
course,
in case people think you have a cavalier attitude about it, I think you've
I learned my lesson. Don't overcharge. It's really dumb. That was one of my first times ever overcharging too, which is a sad thing.
And one of the things that you and other racers have said is we're not like keen to overcharge, but if other people are going to overcharge, we got to do it to keep up. And that's
Right.
a situation you kind of felt like you were in.
Yeah, and really, and that was the only thing I didn't like about this race was I went to the organizers and said, hey, look, you have a format established, which I don't even know if anyone's going to be able to finish these laps in the A mains, because like I knew for qualifying people could slow down the 5th lap, but when you're 6 pilots who are all about the same skill level and the top in the world, and you're pushing for it, you can't just slow down.
No.
And I knew it'd be an issue. Originally, all of my concerns were voted down by people running 6S, not saying names, because I did not come prepared for the race.
Okay.
Now, I also made a proclamation before the race I'd only run 4S, and regardless of everything, I stuck by it. So I found a setup, and we'll talk about that could do
That's
it in
good.
theory.
Yeah.
But even though, and unfortunately it didn't last very long, the problem was at the end of the day, even in those mains, everyone was overcharging to a manufacturer limit, to be fair. But even then, multiple people in those final races were having issues.
Do you feel like running 4S, if you had to go back and do it again, might you have chosen to run 6S? Do you feel like it was a mistake?
Yes and no. So I'm in the process, at least when this video is being made, of testing different 4S rigs and different 6S rigs. I finally found a 6S rig with a light enough my problem with 6S is there is less sag. I don't like the weight. I feel like the weight slows me down. I'm a more technical pilot. I fly technical tracks versus fast tracks. In Open Grove case, it was more fast track. Maybe it would have been just fine in that case. But back to the point, I think it really just depends on the setup. I think I found a 4S setup right before the race that I actually flew in the first of 3 races. It was a 2140 kV 4S with a big heavy prop, a 5.1 HQ. And I ran on a non-HV 1300, and I remember, even though it crashed out after 3 laps into midair, I remember checking the voltage, and it was like 15.8. So it was already over halfway done.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that you feel like with the right motors for the track,
yes,
4S could still be competitive.
Yes, and a perfect example is Chance Hartman Freefall. He ran Lumineer 2206 2350 kV motors. The downside is he was maxed out. He
was basically full throttle the whole course.
Which I was with my low
But he
kV.
just ran so clean and smooth that he was able to finish.
Yep.
He was on a more efficient, slower motor, but had to run.
Yes.
Do you think he had less room for mistakes than the 6S pilots?
I don't know. I feel like he did have less room for mistakes. I mean, when you're maxed out on the sticks like that, there's really just no room for error.
Right.
That being said, I saw so many pilots on 6S, and this is not me trying to pick on anyone, but like, with a 6S fast rig, I mean, I saw people blowing out corners, where like what we would do on our 4S rigs is we would take stuff really tight.
Isn't that an argument? Isn't that an argument that 6S is better if the pilots can race with more mistakes and still win? And can't you then? Doesn't that give you more room to refine and get better and increase the bar?
The problem that I found was there wasn't like a significant flight time advantage with 6S. For example, even in qualifiers when I was coming barely close to the finish gear on the 5th lap, I mean, Corey Ibanez, the guy who won, really fast guy, really good advocate for 6S. He literally was doing the same thing at the same pace I was limping through. So I don't know, maybe it gives you a little bit more room for error. Like, I mean, considering the way he was flying and whatnot, I was taking turns more tight. I mean, I was trying to fly the quad more efficiently.
Was your quad lighter?
Yes, it was a lot lighter.
Even with the 1900?
Even with the 1900.
You think you were able to fly cleaner?
I was able to fly cleaner. My 1900 quad flight is about 410, 420 grams all weight. It's really light. And I believe in light builds. I run 20 by 20 stacks. And so I do think with 4S, there's, at this point in level, there's less room for what you can do. If you want to get a 4S rig to finish a 2.5 minute race at a speed, you have to go your window of what you can do is about this big.
Yeah.
With 6S, from what I'm testing, your window is a lot bigger.
So then the big question, are you switching to 6S in the future, or are you going to stick with 4S?
I personally am testing a lot of stuff right now. Maybe if we include some DVR in this that I can give you, we'll give you guys a look. We set up a track here at Quad Camp.
Yeah.
I've been running 6S and 4S with identical weights too, so it's, the weight's the same on the motor. We can list the description of the stuff. And personally, I'm not sure. I was very impressed with the way the 6S quad's been flying. I think it has a little bit less sag for sure. The flight times may be just a little bit better, but I mean, it's really the problem is I'm flying a 6S rig, which I'm still not as familiar with. So the moment I pick up my 4S rig, I'm hauling ass around this track.
You're faster because you know it better.
I'm just way faster, but and I'm getting less flight time because I'm also hauling. I'm full throttle. So I don't know. I think what I'm going to have in the future is an arsenal of different rigs. But I still think at the end of the day, on a tight technical track, or first to 2 or 3 laps, Forrest is gonna win, and that's what you'll see me out there at the race running.
So I guess the conclusion is the right setup for the right track.
Yes, don't limit. My tip to people is don't pull a Captain Flamethrower in. I made a proclamation to run for us. People didn't think I'd do it when they saw the track. I did it. I did complete.
You came in, and for the record, where'd you place?
I placed 4th.
That's respectable.
And that's respectable. And the bigger achievement for me was in the final race. I took 2nd, and I was the only 4S pilot that entire event to actually complete 5 laps. And I don't know what I did that final race, but I overcharged to 4.35. Manufacturer specs, I think, maybe or not. And I completed the 5 laps, and maybe it was just the way I was flying the course that time.
I think you switched motors in that last one, didn't you? Didn't you go down to the 2150 kV?
I did, but I crashed that set first run, so I was back to 2650.
That's right.
I finished 5 laps, and I had about, I think my voltage was 14.2.
Okay.
So maybe it was just flying. I think the long story short of it is success at this point in time on bigger, wider open courses has more flexibility for what you can run.
Okay.
Forest doesn't. I probably will be sticking with Forest just because I think the setups that I have right now work really well for me. If I need an endurance race, I now know, based on what I found in that first race and what testing I've been doing recently, that Forest can still do it. And for me, it's just, at that point, personal preference. Do I want to go the higher voltage, or do I want to run the same battery, lose a little bit of flight performance, but have the endurance factor? It's a personal preference.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for being here, Alex.
Thank you.
And you guys said 1900 kV or 1900 milliamp hour 4S is more equivalent to the battery that you're flying. And so when I heard about your example, I really wanted to get your perspective.
Right.
This is obviously not a scientific bench test or whatever, but I feel like the experience that racers bring to it is really valuable, because at the end of the day, you guys are always thinking real hard about what works.
Oh yeah, for sure, all the time.
And that's kind of science of its own, even if it's not on the bench. So
yeah,
that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy flying.
See you guys.
Bye.